There are things in life that break you cleanly. One moment. One word. One piece of paper. And after that moment, everything that came before it looks completely different. The memories don't disappear. They just change shape. I want you to think about something. Think about the first time a child called you dad. Not as a performance. Not because they were told to. But that first real, unguarded, completely natural moment when a small person looked at you and said that word like it belonged to you. Like you were the answer to it. I had that moment. Standing in a kitchen on a Sunday morning, pancakes on the stove, cartoons playing in the background. My daughter, 4 years old, looked up at me from the floor where she was drawing. And said, "Daddy, can I have the blue one?" She meant the crayon. I gave her the blue crayon. And I stood there for a second and thought, this is everything. Her name was Lily. And I loved her the way you only love a child. Completely. Unconditionally. Without a single calculation. I loved her through chicken pox and nightmares and first days of school and the phase where she refused to eat anything that wasn't yellow. I loved her through 10 years of ordinary, irreplaceable mornings. And then, on an ordinary Tuesday, a DNA test told me she wasn't mine. People ask me, "What did you do?" and I tell them the truth. For a long time, I did nothing. Because the hardest part wasn't the betrayal. The hardest part was looking at a 10-year-old girl who had done absolutely nothing wrong, and figuring out how to love her exactly the same, while everything around her was falling apart. This is not a story about anger. This is not a story about revenge. This is a story about what it means to be a father. And whether biology has anything to do with it at all. My name is Thomas. And this is the story of the 10 longest and most important years of my life. I met Claire when we were both 24. A work thing. Not the same company, but a joint project that threw us into the same conference room for 3 weeks. She was funny in meetings. Not performatively funny. Not the person who makes jokes to be noticed. She was funny in the specific way of someone who sees the absurdity in things and can't quite help pointing it out quietly, usually just to the person sitting next to her. I was sitting next to her. We started having lunch together during the project. Then dinner once it ended. Then the kind of relationship that starts so naturally you can't quite remember when it officially began. A year in, we moved in together. 2 years in, we got married. Small wedding. 40 people. Her parents, my parents, our closest friends. A reception in a garden that got rained on halfway through and somehow became a better party because of it. I have a photograph from that evening. Both of us completely soaked, laughing so hard we're barely standing up. I kept that photograph for a long time. 8 months after the wedding, Claire told me she was pregnant. I remember exactly where I was. Sitting on the edge of the bathtub while she stood in the doorway holding the test. I remember the expression on her face. Not just joy. Something more complicated than joy. Something I read, at the time, as nervousness. The normal nervousness of 2 people standing at the edge of something enormous. I understand now that it was something else. But I didn't understand then. I just stood up and hugged her. And said, "We're going to be okay. We're going to be really okay." She held on very tightly. I thought it was happiness. Lily was born on a Thursday in April. 6 pounds, 4 ounces. Dark hair, which surprised me. Claire and I were both fair. But the nurse said hair often changes in the first months, which it did, slightly, and I forgot about it entirely. The first time I held her, in that particular hospital lighting that makes everything feel simultaneously ordinary and sacred, I felt something happen inside me that I don't have better words for than arrival. Like something had been waiting to click into place. And now it had. I went home that night to get a few things for Claire and I stood in the nursery we'd painted together. Pale yellow, her choice, not gender specific, just happy. I sat in the rocking chair we'd bought second hand and sanded down and repainted. And I sat there in the quiet for a while. And I thought, I would do anything for that child. I meant it completely. I still mean it. That has never changed. Not once. Not even after everything. Let me tell you what 10 years looks like. Not the highlights. Not the big moments. The ordinary ones. The ones that make up a life. Lily at 2, refusing to sleep anywhere except on my chest. I spent so many evenings in that rocking chair, her small weight on me, one hand on her back, barely breathing in case I woke her. Lily at 4. The blue crayon. The pancakes. The cartoons. Lily at 5. Her first day of school. She held my hand all the way to the classroom door and then let go like she'd been doing it her whole life and walked straight in. I stood outside the door for a full minute after she disappeared, just standing there. Her teacher found me and said, gently, "They're always okay, Dad." I nodded. Walked to my car. Sat there for 10 minutes. Lily at 7. The broken arm. She fell off the climbing frame at the park on a Sunday afternoon and I had her in the car before she'd even finished the first cry. 4 hours in the emergency room. She was braver than I was. She held my hand while they said it. Lily at 8. The science fair project. Volcanoes. We spent 2 weekends on it. The kitchen looked like a disaster zone. It came third. She was devastated. I told her third was brilliant. She told me I was biased. She was right. I was. Lily at 9. The hard year. Claire and I were struggling. Not dramatically, not yet, but quietly, in the way that long marriages sometimes do. Lily sensed it the way children always do. She started coming into our room at night again, the way she had as a toddler. I would carry her back to bed. Tuck her in. Sit on the edge of the mattress until she fell back to sleep. I always stayed longer than I needed to. Lily at 10. 5th grade. Best friends with a girl named Sophie. Going through a phase of reading fantasy novels under the covers with a torch after bedtime. A phase I pretended not to notice. She had started to look, people said, like she was finding her own face. Losing the roundness of childhood. Becoming more specifically herself. I would look at her sometimes and try to see myself in her features. I told myself the way she held a pencil was like me. The way she tilted her head when she was thinking. Parents do that. Find themselves in their children. I was no different. I was simply wrong. The marriage had been struggling for 2 years before the truth came out. I won't make Claire into a villain here. That's not what this story is. We had grown, as people sometimes do, in directions that didn't align. The warmth was still there, somewhere. But the closeness wasn't. We were 2 people sharing a house and a child and a routine, and calling it a marriage because we didn't know what else to call it. We went to counseling. Twice, actually. Once when Lily was 7, once when she was 9. It helped, in the way that counseling helps. It gave us language for things. But language alone doesn't rebuild something that has quietly come apart at the seams. By the time Lily was 10, we had begun, carefully and sadly, to talk about what came next. Not dramatically. Not with anger. Just two people sitting at a kitchen table, speaking honestly for perhaps the first time in years, about what was real and what was no longer working. It was during one of those conversations that Claire said something. She didn't mean to. I could see it the moment the words left her. The way her face changed. The way she reached for them as if she could pull them back. She couldn't. She had mentioned a name. A man. Someone from before Lily was born. Before the wedding, even. It came out sideways. Not as a confession, but as a reference. A context. And the name. And the timeline. I did the mathematics quietly, in my own head, in real time, sitting at that kitchen table. And I looked at Claire. And she looked at me. And neither of us said anything for a very long time. I asked for a DNA test. I didn't shout. I didn't leave. I sat at that table and I said, very quietly, I need to know. Claire didn't argue. She nodded. And that was, somehow, the most devastating thing of all. The nod. Because a nod meant she had wondered too. A nod meant the question had lived in her as well, all these years, and she had chosen, every single day, not to answer it. The results took 8 days. 8 days during which I went to work, came home, made dinner, helped Lily with her homework, said goodnight, closed her bedroom door. 8 days during which I read to her before bed. We were halfway through a book, a fantasy novel she'd chosen, full of maps and invented kingdoms. 8 days during which I was completely normal on the outside. On the inside, I was standing very still at the edge of something I couldn't see the bottom of. The result came on a Tuesday morning. I opened it alone. Claire had offered to be there. I said no. I sat at my desk in the spare room, the one I'd been sleeping in for 3 weeks by then, and I opened the envelope. I read it once. Then I put it face down on the desk. And I sat there for a long time. 99.998% probability of non-paternity. That's what it said. In clinical, careful, completely indifferent language. 99.998%. 10 years. Chicken pox and nightmares and broken arms and blue crayons and science fair volcanoes and fantasy novels and first days of school. 10 years. And a number on a piece of paper that said, not yours. I want to tell you what I felt in that moment. Because people always assume they know. They assume rage. They assume collapse. They assume some dramatic, cinematic breaking point. What I actually felt was nothing. For about 10 minutes, just nothing. And then, slowly, from underneath the nothing, grief. Not for myself. For Lily. Because she didn't know. She was at school right now, probably in maths, probably passing a note to Sophie about whatever they found important that week. She had no idea that the world had just shifted. She had no idea that everything she thought she knew about her family was more complicated than she'd ever been told. And she had done nothing. Nothing to deserve any of this. She was just a 10-year-old girl who called me Dad. I picked up the piece of paper. I folded it carefully. I put it in the desk drawer. And I went to make coffee. And I thought, whatever comes next, she is still my daughter. Whatever that piece of paper says, I am still her father. That is not something a number can change. I believed that then. I believe it now. I will believe it until I die. I spoke to Claire that evening. Lily was at a friend's house. A sleepover, already planned. The timing felt deliberate, though it wasn't. Just the universe providing a quiet house for a conversation that needed one. We sat in the kitchen. The same kitchen where 11 years ago she'd stood in the doorway holding a pregnancy test. The same kitchen where Lily had asked for the blue crayon. I told Claire what the test said. She didn't look surprised. She looked like someone who has been waiting for a door to finally open, knowing what's on the other side and dreading it anyway. She told me the truth. All of it. Quietly, without excuses, without asking me to understand. There had been someone. Before we got married. It had ended badly. She hadn't been sure, when she found out she was pregnant, who the father was. She had made a choice to say nothing, to move forward, to believe that it was mine. Maybe because she wanted it to be, maybe because she was afraid. Maybe because by the time Lily arrived and I was standing in that hospital holding her, the question felt less important than the answer that was already there. I listened to all of it. I didn't interrupt. When she finished, I said, "Does she know? Does Lily know anything?" "No," Claire said. "Nothing." I nodded. "Then that's what matters most right now," I said. Her. How this affects her. That's the only thing I care about. Claire looked at me for a long moment. "I'm sorry, Thomas," she said. "I know that's not enough. But I am." I looked at the kitchen table. "I know," I said. And I meant it. I was not ready to forgive her. But I believed she was sorry. Those are two different things. Here is what I decided. Not in one moment. In many. Over weeks and months of careful, painful thought. Lily would know the truth someday. When she was old enough to hold it. In a way that was honest and age-appropriate and led by what was best for her, not by what was easiest for the adults who had made a mess of things. That was not my decision alone. Claire and I made it together. One of the only things we made together, in the end. We separated 6 months after the test. Quietly. Carefully. The way you do when there's a child watching everything. Lily took it hard. She took it the way 10-year-olds take things. All at once, completely, with a grief that doesn't have the adult vocabulary yet to express itself, so it comes out sideways in silences and stomachaches and wanting to be held. I held her as much as she'd let me. Which was a lot. She stayed with me Tuesday to Friday. With Claire on weekends. A schedule we built around her school, her friends, her life. One evening, about a month after Claire and I separated, Lily was sitting at my kitchen table doing homework. She looked up at me. And she said, "Dad," I said. "Yes," she said. "Are you okay?" I looked at this 10-year-old girl asking me if I was okay. And I said, "I'm really okay, Lil. I promise." She looked at me for a second like she was deciding whether to believe me. Then she said, "Okay." And went back to her homework. She called me Dad. She still calls me Dad. She always will. And whatever else has happened, whatever else is complicated and unresolved and may take years to fully understand, that word, that one word, is the truest thing I have. People ask me sometimes, if you could go back, would you want to know sooner? And I sit with that question for a while. Because the honest answer is, I don't know. Knowing sooner might have changed things. Might have meant less time in the not knowing. But it also would have meant less of her. Less of the blue crayon and the broken arm and the fantasy novels under the covers. Less of the Sunday pancakes. Less of a small person looking up at me like I was the answer to something. And I cannot wish for less of that. I will not wish for less of that. Biology is a fact. Fatherhood is a choice. I made that choice on a Thursday in April, in a hospital, under ordinary lighting. I make it again every single day. My name is Thomas. And Lily is my daughter. That is the only truth that has never changed.